This is the last video in the Jesus Buffet series, and this one's titled The Iron Fist Jesus. You see, the first three aspects or views people have on Jesus were ones of people that accepted him, that really believed in him, but they wanted to believe this specific spot or this specific thing about Jesus, and for one reason or another they didn't take into account all of who Jesus is. But this last one's different. You see, this last section of the Jesus Buffet, the Iron Fist Jesus, is one, it's really an excuse for why people don't believe in Jesus, why people don't give their hearts to him. You see, Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, it's got the Beatitudes in it, and it's probably the greatest sermon ever preached. And it's hard. There's a lot of hard pills to swallow in those chapters. There's verses like where he says that it's not enough not to kill anybody, but if you have anger in your heart, you might as well have killed them already. It's not enough not to commit adultery, but if you have lust in your heart, you've already committed adultery. He says that if your hand causes you to sin, to cut it off, because it's better to go into heaven with one hand than into hell with two. And if your eye causes you to sin, then gouge it out, because it's better to go into heaven blind than to be able to see everything there is to see in hell. And these are hard things to comprehend, and it's a hard guidelines, and it's a hard goal to reach. It seems like Jesus came on the scene and raised the bar. He said, how you guys have been living is not good enough. So let me raise the bar even higher. And he got even higher with it, to the point that no person on earth could ever reach that standard. And people read those sections of the Bible, and they read those chapters, and they read those things Jesus said, and they said, if this is who Jesus is, I can't believe in him. There's no way I can believe in a God that would expect so much righteousness from me, so much out of me. I can't live this way. Obviously, he can't truly be the creator of the universe. And see, I believe that we're misunderstanding why Jesus came on the scene and said those specific things. You see, at that time, there was two types of people. There were the Pharisees and the Sadducees, those who kept the law and prided themselves on how perfect they were. And then there was the people that strived as hard as they could just to meet the law, and still failed, and still had a hard time reaching that law. See, Jesus came on the scene, and he raised the bar for two reasons. One, to show the Pharisees and the Sadducees and those righteous people that they weren't righteous, that their good works were like filthy rags, and that they, even though they did according to the law, they still weren't perfect, because God's standard was so much higher. And to show them how much they needed Jesus. And then on the flip side, to the people that strived for it, see, I find myself relating to those people more than the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And I think there's a lot of people out there that do. They try their best to live a good life, and then they come to this part of Scripture, and they're like, Jesus, how can you expect me to live so righteous? How can you expect so much out of me? I can't do it. I'm going to fail. And then they let go of Jesus, this iron fist Jesus that's ruling and reigning with an iron fist. And if you think an impure thought, you're going to hell. Or if you hate somebody, you're going to hell. Or if your hand causes you to sin, you need to cut it off. And that you need to live in this depressed state of trying your best to please the Father, when really we're walking around like a dog with our head down and our tail tucked between our back legs, praying that we don't mess up so we don't receive another beating from the abusive Father that's in heaven. And those are the thoughts that come through our head, especially when we read these verses. And I believe that's how a lot of those people that were standing around Jesus felt when they heard him speak those words. But see, Jesus didn't speak those words to make us think of him and God like this abusive animal owner. He spoke those words to let us know that we can't reach his perfect standard by ourselves. You see, it's when we come to the point in our lives when we realize that we can't do it on our own, that's when he smiles and says, that's why I sent Jesus. He raised the standard so high so we would realize how much we need Jesus. See, we can't reach perfection on our own, but with Jesus, we can. Jesus comes in and he helps us. And yes, we're going to fail, and yes, we're going to fall, but that's why he came. He came to save us and to pick us back up off the ground. See, Jesus isn't this iron fist warlord, dictator, waiting for us to mess up so he can scold us. He's a loving Father, standing there with arms wide open, waiting for us to fall into his arms and say, Jesus, I can't do it. Here's my life. Do so much more with it than I could ever do by myself. The Iron Fist Jesus. See, it's not one. That's an attribute of Jesus that I don't believe is in the Bible. Jesus is not a warlord. He's not a dictator. He's a loving Father. That, yes, has to discipline sometimes, but not out of hatred, out of love. And he longs for us to just fall into his arms and give our lives to him. Jesus is not an iron fist dictator. He's a loving Father, full of grace.